Hi, welcome to Rock Ed Camp 2020. I'm Chris Mooney, and I'd like to thank you for joining me for this session entitled Designing for Impact. Our time together when meeting in person was meant to be interactive, filled with time for reflection and discussion, all while using the book and the information from Thomas C. Murray's Personal and Authentic. A virtual presentation isn't going to allow for that, but I'll do my best and I'll try to share questions to ponder, ideas to implement, all from the book, with the hope of helping you make the learning that happens in your classrooms even more authentic and relevant to every learner. I encourage you to read the book and visit his website. He not only provides questions that can be used to help guide you through the book study, but also connects you to numerous resources to go along with each chapter. As I present this, please know I'm by no means an expert. I actually would consider myself more of a lifelong learner. However, it is something that's really near and dear to my heart. As an educator in the area of health and physical education, I think it's extremely important that my students find relevance in my content area. I have to continually strive to find ways to make the learning that occurs authentic. This can help my students find value in being healthy and well. My hope is that some of the material I share from Thomas C. Murray's book motivates you as it did me to reflect on the way you design for learning in your classroom. What can you do to make it student-driven, authentic, relevant now and in the future? A little background about me. I'm entering my 31st year in education. After graduating from SRU with a degree in health and physical education, I started my teaching career teaching elementary physical education in the Mesa Public School District. While in Arizona, I received my master's degree in elementary education. I may be a little biased, but my husband CP and I are the proud parents of two wonderful young men, Logan 25 and Ty 23. As a family, we love being in nature and being active while we're there, whether it's hiking, biking, fishing, or kayaking. In addition to time spent with family and time spent being active in the great outdoors, I have to say I'm one of the lucky ones. I truly love my job. The fact that I get to learn right beside some wonderful people in the Slippery Rock High School building is an amazing opportunity. So Thomas C. Murray, the man behind the material I'm about to share with you, is a director of innovation for Future Ready Schools. He's authored multiple books, and he's been in the trenches as both a teacher and an administrator. If you connect with the information in the presentation and want to hear more about his message, you can find him on social media platforms, also a variety of educational podcasts. One of my favorite ones is his interview or his conversation on the Teach Better Team talk. You'll also find more inspirational messages on his YouTube channel. I'm actually going to share a few audio snippets from his YouTube channel in the presentation. The audio didn't transfer over very well, but I'll share some links at the end that you can certainly check out his website. Guess I would say to consider what's to follow as cliff notes to the book, ideas that I found helpful and those that inspired me to reflect about my current practices in the classroom, things that I want to try to implement in the upcoming years, all with the mindset of making sure that I'm providing kids with the instruction that they deserve. The thought of relationships before rigor is important all the time, but in light of our current situation with COVID-19, this is going to be extra important that we take the time to really connect with our students, regardless of what the setting is, whether we're in a virtual setting or we're in a blended learning situation or back in our actual physical classrooms. So I'm going to take you through each chapter and provide you with some thoughts to ponder, as well as some strategies to maybe try. Thanks for joining me and enjoy. Chapter 1 starts with the foundation, the importance of building relationships with our students. I'd like to actually play a clip from one of Thomas C. Murray's videos for you, where he talks about the importance of trust in building those relationships.
You see, you can't say be respectful if you're the colleague that's walking down the hallway gossiping about another colleague. You see, that's called being hypocritical. You can't say I demand respect in the classroom from my students and then be in the faculty room trashing somebody else. Truly, modeling expectations builds trust. And trust is the foundation of relationships, isn't it? You ever been in a relationship where you can't trust the person? Like, how's that working for you? And relationships are truly that foundation of culture.
Value is something we all long for. We all look for ways to feel like what we do and what we say has value. It's important to find ways to interact with others throughout our day that helps them feel valued. If we're able to teach kids that their voices and ideas are important and help them actually learn to share respectfully and thoughtfully those ideas, it can go a long way in creating that positive culture. As we start thinking about how we build relationships, it's probably a good place to start is thinking about how we actually get to know our students, how we learn about their interests and what their stories are. When you have figured out how you do that, what do you do with the info once you have it? I know personally one of the things that I took away from reading the book is although I thought I had a handle on forming strong relationships with my students, I realized that one of the things I'm missing is actually adding relevance to the instruction in my classroom by tapping into those relationships and really bringing the information that I've learned about each one of them back into the classroom learning. So as you plan for next year, regardless of whether it's virtual or whether it's hybrid or in person, think about what you can do to truly find out about your students and then use that information to actually build upon those relationships with each student in a way that can positively impact their learning. Throughout the book, in each chapter, not only does Tom provide questions to think about, to add to your reflection, but he also gives some things to think about trying in the classroom. So in chapter 1, here are some of the things that can help with building relationships. So other than getting to know our students and using that to connect the learning to them, it's also important that we lean into who we are. We need to be authentic, smile and laugh and share some personal stories. Vulnerability can be something that's hard for students to understand. It's probably even hard for us as adults to be okay with. But if we can model that for our students in ways where we show them what failing forward looks like, we model what an apology in public looks like, we say we own up to it if we truly don't know the answer to something. One of the things that often we hear of in education, the importance of low cost, high yield, things that don't cost anything or cost very little, but yet give us a lot of bang for the buck. Greeting our students as they come to class or to start the day is one of those things. Another thing that was brought up was 3 sticky notes. The administrator actually would take 3 sticky notes and put them on his desk, and he would not leave school that day until he had delivered those 3 sticky notes, either to colleagues or to students, just as pick-me-ups, just as recognition for, I see what you're doing and you're doing an awesome job. One of the things that I have to remind myself as I learn new things is sometimes taking it one step at a time. So maybe if you're thinking about trying this, instead of 3 a day, put 3 sticky notes on your desk or by your computer, and by the end of the week, your goal is to have delivered those sticky notes, words of encouragement, to somebody in your building or somebody in your life that needs them. Just a reminder on discipline, always discipline with dignity. Remember to stay focused on behavior and not the student. And then be sure to follow up and actually have a conversation to reconnect after that discipline issue. We'll talk again in later chapters about the importance of bringing our students' interests as far as music, current culture, into our instruction when we can, just to connect more. Reflection, as we all know, is an important part of growing as a learner. So if you can work time into your day or maybe at least weekly, allow time for students to reflect on what they're actually learning. And then if you can follow up with them on that to help build, that can be even more impactful. Difficult conversations can be a tough thing, knowing where to draw the line and what to be okay with. But if we can have some of those difficult conversations with our students, it can actually be a great opportunity for them to learn how to navigate difficult life situations. So we certainly can't fix their problems all the time, but we can definitely listen and show interest. And in doing so, maybe even help them learn how to deal with anger and disappointment and heartache. And then the last suggestion here on the slide is just a reminder to break the monotony every now and then, whether it's between classes, whether it's in the hallways in the morning or at the end of the day or in the middle of your class. Find ways to bring enjoyment into your classroom. In the clip I played, when Tom talks about relationships and building them as the foundation of our instruction, he mentions trust and how important that is. This is one of the resources provided with Chapter 1, and it just provides some good reminders and strategies on ways that we can actually build that trust. If we can truly get our kids to trust us, it actually allows us to get more out of them, push them a little bit harder to accomplish things that maybe they didn't think they could accomplish. In this second chapter, Creating a Culture for Learning, we'll take a look at how the culture of the school and classroom can impact the learning that's happening there. Tom will emphasize how much our mindset matters to the culture of the building.
What is it that you intentionally do to build the culture of your school? What is it that you intentionally do to build the culture of your district? Now, what I didn't ask you is what your principal does. What I didn't ask you is what your superintendent does. Ask what you do. You can maximize impact and minimize blame, or maximize blame and minimize impact. Which one are you?
Think of this as putting Maslow before Bloom, making sure our kiddos feel safe in our classroom. Students' basic needs have to be met if they're going to thrive as learners. There's a saying that kids don't learn from people they don't like. Some would argue and say we can learn from anyone. However, I challenge you, take a minute and think about your own education. Think about those teachers that you connected with a little bit more than the others. Were you more attentive in their class? Did you work to do your best, even if it wasn't your favorite subject? When a student feels connected to a teacher, they're typically more engaged in the class. The second suggestion is about self-care, which empowers us to invest in others. 2 simple suggestions that can add value to your self-care. 1, carve out 5 minutes each day to be with someone that makes you smile. And 2, create a morning routine that makes you feel great. You'll be better equipped to handle the day. Out of the gate, talks about being intentional with the way you start not only the school year, but each day or each class. Think about what you want and work towards that goal. When it comes to keeping a checklist of interactions, this helps us not lose track of those kiddos in the middle. Sometimes we focus on the kids that need extra help and those students who have become very good at playing school, and those kids that just go with the flow kind of get lost in the shuffle. The last suggestion here is on caring out loud, which boils down to this. If we want kind, empathetic, hardworking, humble, courageous kiddos, then we have to be all that. We have to let our kids know that we value that, and we have to make sure that we model that for our learners. Don't underestimate the importance that our staff connection and morale can have on our school's culture. It's important that we find ways to bring our staffs together, whether it's eating lunch or breakfast together, or just sharing our appreciation for each other and letting each other know that we care. It doesn't hurt to infuse a little bit of play and fun into the school culture as well. In the book, Thomas C. Murray shares about a school that does drops on Friday afternoon. They have a quick staff meeting, and in the staff meeting, they don't talk about any business at all. It is simply meant to celebrate successes. So it gives staff a chance to give a shout out, acknowledge success of another staff member during the week. The only rule is that if you receive a drop one week, you have to give the drop the next week. So find ways to celebrate your colleagues and enhance the culture of your school. In chapter 3, he takes a look at the story, the importance of the story inside each learner. He actually reminds us to start with our why. What do we really want our students to know, do, and value? Last year, I had the opportunity to present with Tad Campagna, and we talked a lot about this, the importance of knowing what our core values are and how we can align those with our instructions to help our students attain those core values. So it was about collaboration. If I find that collaboration is really important, knowing my why and aligning it to my curriculum is making sure that when I design my lessons, I'm designing them to allow my students to practice collaboration. So when we know our why, it allows us to walk with purpose. And when we couple that with knowing our learners, it allows us to really bring relevance to their learning. Have you ever changed your mind about someone once you knew their story or looked through a different lens?
You see, we know our own hearts, but do we see it in other people? As our students walk through our hallways, do we see data points and test scores? Or do we see the hearts of the children that walk by us? As our colleagues walk by us in the hallways, do we see the science teacher or the person that science teacher is? Truly, the difference between making a judgment and having empathy is understanding the story. How do we understand the story of those around us? How do we take time to understand the stories around us? See, a child's story will define the context in which they learn. You know what I'm talking about. You know those days you have something on your heart, maybe it's just so heavy, and you've got to do something, and you're just not totally present. And guess what? Kids walk into our classrooms every day like that. We have empathy to understand those pieces.
As we learn the stories behind our students, it's helpful to know how they like to be celebrated, what makes them feel special. Not a bad idea to do check-ins with them, whether it's written or whether it's verbal, or it could even be digital. Use a Google form, and it can be one simple question, a Likert scale on how they're doing that week, with an opportunity to comment if there's something special they want you to know about. Another way to really find the story about your learners is to do a family questionnaire. How cool would it be to find out about your students from their family's perspective, as well as the student's perspective? And think about the impact that can have on connecting with the families right from the beginning of the school year when you're asking them about their child and showing that much interest right from the beginning of the school year. It's also helpful when it comes to learning their stories and knowing our why is being prepared to answer the age-old question of why? Why do we need to learn this? Why can't I talk to Joey when I'm done with my test? If we are able to really offer a true answer, not just the because I said so or because that's the rule, that not only allows our students to understand the reasoning behind what we're doing, but it also models deeper thinking for our students. So ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, definitely impact a child's ability to learn, and that could be a whole nother presentation. But it's important for us to keep in mind that each student's life has been impacted in different ways, especially during this latest COVID-19 experience. So unless we find out about their stories, we won't know what they've gone through. Using our colleagues can be really helpful in this situation, working together as a staff to find out about everybody's background. There's a Nevada middle school actually that they share about in the book, who they have almost 1,000 students, and they take and list all of those students, and they have a space to check if any staff member knows them by name and face, if they know something personal about them, or knows a personal family or kid's story, and their academic standing. So they do that for every student, and then they take a look as a staff to see if there are any of their students that don't have the check marks. And then they know as a staff that they really need to work to connect with that kiddo. Their district motto happens to be every child by name and face to graduation. Now it's time to think about what those authentic learning experiences might look like. In chapter 4, we look at not only the importance of envisioning what we want, but really the value of how we start each year by setting the tone.
Teachers, what are you going to do on day one that has kids running back to your classroom on day 2? You've got that opportunity. Biology teachers in the room, what if 15 minutes into day 1 you started dissecting something? Don't tell me we can't. Chemistry teachers, what if day 1 you just started blowing stuff up? I mean, legally, right? Think about what those kids would think. Let me flip it this way. When your kiddos go home after they come to you for the first time, when do they stop telling their parents or those their families at home what happened on day 1? You see, I messed that up those first few years. It was all about me. It was all about my stuff and my rules and my classroom and my textbooks. And don't mess that textbook up. It's going to cost you $150. And listen, you've got to get to that stuff. Of course you do. But does day 1, minute 1 have to be every textbook that we're going to get all year long? What if your goals of day 1 are to do everything you can to turn your kids on to what you will be teaching that year, to have fun, to build culture, so on day 2 they cannot wait to get back to you?
So take a minute and think about, if students didn't have to come to your class, would they? Would you want to be a student in your class? What can you do to make this year a great one, starting day 1? Other things to consider include some of the things that maybe you do because you've always done them and it's just become routine, and maybe it's time to examine changing. That's one of the things they talk about with the emergency learning that had to happen due to the school shutdown in March. In some ways, it's allowed us as educators to examine what we've been doing and look at new ways to make our learning happen, our instruction happen. Think about your classroom. Is your instruction more teacher-centered, the so-called sage on the stage, or is it more learner-centered, a chance for you to ride right alongside your students as they're learning? How often do you give your students choice and ownership in their lessons? What does your actual physical classroom design say about the classroom? Is it a community? Do the kids get voice in what goes on the walls? Do they get voice in the way it's decorated? Or is it all about you? It's not a bad idea to ask your students about their best school experiences. Actually take their information, their feedback, and try to implement some of the things that you felt comfortable with in your class. It's also a good idea to use your colleagues as resources. Think about the possibilities. If we could all tap into each other's strengths in our very own building and learn from each other. There's a quick little YouTube video entitled Original to You, Amazing to Others, which gives a neat perspective on why sometimes we're hesitant to share. Wonder Days or passion projects all are great ways to do some design-centered learning, which can also help with setting the stage for authentic and relevant learning in your classroom. As far as the learning space and getting some input from students, perhaps you can save not your entire classroom, but portions of it for them to help decorate. Get some input on design, how they think that learning would happen best in that setting. Thomas C. Murray talked in the video about starting day 1 with a bang. blowing stuff up. So think about what you could do to be intentional with that first impression, whether it's with your students or with the families. How could you really set the tone at the beginning of the year? And then social media. A lot of times it gets a bad rap, but you can really use it to your advantage if you connect with the right people. There are a lot of great educators out there, which allows you to connect with people in similar pedagogies and find out what they're doing. You don't have to recreate or reinvent the wheel, and you don't have to take all of that advice, but blend what you find there to make it yours. Not only can it be helpful to you in the classroom, but it can also help your students learn how to use social media in a responsible way. Some specific strategies mentioned in this chapter ask us to consider doing some of these things. So at the elementary level, maybe find out from the prior year teacher some strengths about each one of your students, and then write each one of them a personal note and attach something in there about those qualities, their strengths. Take time to learn their faces and names ahead of the first day so that you can put names and faces together from the beginning. Consider reading a book online the night before day one and telling them how excited you are to see them. Put that again, use your social media platform to connect. When it comes to the high school, consider creating a kindness tunnel where staff lines the hallway to welcome students, or actually lining the hallways with the red carpet. Both at the elementary and secondary level, you could also try the bringing items in a bag that tell about you on day one. That'll allow students to learn a little bit about you, which goes back to our strengthening relationships. But in addition to that, you can have them turn around and do the same thing on day two, which would allow you to learn a little bit more about them. Chapter 4 was about creating a vision for the future while also learning from the past, being intentional with our first impressions. In Chapter 5, we're going to dive into the actual design process. Take a second and think about professional development that you've experienced. What's made some better than others? I know when I reflect on the professional development opportunities that I've had, the ones that I feel have been most valuable, of course, are the ones that are aligned to my content and are relevant to what I'm doing in the classroom. Part of this is taking into consideration the whole learner, and that's where the SEL comes in. So we talked earlier about the Nevada school district that made SEL a priority in their district. When they actually focused on the SEL, what they saw was increased attendance rates, fewer disciplinary issues, increased state test scores, and of course, the social emotional skills of their students increasing. We have to remember that SEL is not another thing on the plate, it is the plate. These real-world challenges that we want to design to allow for those authentic learning opportunities in our classroom should be based on the news, local community needs, local and national industry. It should be focused not necessarily on solving problems, but definitely on attempting to move the needle. Our students can really rise to this challenge when they feel like they're actually able to make a difference. Design instruction that allows practice of collaboration and other key readiness skills. All of those skills will help prepare our students for performance-based world that they need to be ready for. These skills should include the technical skills, the soft skills, skills to work with technology, as well as, of course, the academic skills. We can make this even more powerful when we allow our students to use authentic tech and gear whenever possible. Bringing staff, administration, parents, even government officials or members of the local business and community groups to serve as an authentic audience can up the game as well, because it leads to authentic purpose, which can increase the quality of their work. In our digital age, you can even use social media to help the kids connect to an authentic audience. So when we allow our students to build and create, design, produce, right alongside others or for others, they have the opportunity to also gain something that will serve them well moving forward, and that's empathy. Never hurts to add in a little bit of competition either. Your winners can receive incentives or awards, or in some cases, you can actually implement the best idea, kind of like the Shark Tank mentality. Now, it's important that students are still working to obtain the desired outcomes that you outline, while also providing them some choice. The choice might come in the area of content, might come in the resources that they're allowed to use, or the tools, or if you're feeling brave, it can even be in the way their learning is assessed. Most of the time in school, it requires our students comply. They work to meet the required elements, to get the grade, to meet a set standard on a rubric. The more we can let go of this control and allow for some student ownership, the closer we can become to our kiddos' desire to learn as opposed to being required to learn. So get creative on ways to connect with your students' learning. This is where knowing them and what kids these days are into can take the mundane and actually breathe some new life into it, which ultimately can lead to some ownership of the students in their own learning. Although authentic design lessons don't necessarily have to be about project-based or design-centered learning, there's certainly value in one of the easiest ways to make learning authentic and relevant. When students have the opportunity to become creators versus consumers, it can lead to so much more, as you can see in this graphic. Now, this graphic is actually from Dr. John Spencer and A.J. Giuliani. One of the things that we can't ignore when it comes to making learning authentic is the feedback that we provide. So have you ever put a lot of work into something only to have it returned with a check mark or a well done or some other simple comment? Take time to give your students authentic feedback. Students have to know what's expected to start with, regardless of who sets those parameters, or even if you've set them together. It's important to start the authentic feedback with clear expectations. They have to know what's expected. When giving feedback, be sure to include tangible ideas for growth and specific ideas for what to do next. If necessary, make sure that this feedback happens in person. Have a discussion. Reference in that discussion some specific skills or a knowledge base that can help them lead to more action and allow them time to actually implement the feedback. It's also important to vary how you give the feedback. It can take the form of verbal, written, or even video reflections. Allow students to gather artifacts or create portfolios. It's also helpful if you can make giving and receiving feedback from peers a skill that the students actually learn. If you make protocols and teach those protocols and have opportunity for the students to practice them, that can be something that can be used ongoing in your classes. I put the 3-2-1 here. One of the protocols suggested in the book is having students review a peer's work and indicate 3 things that they liked about the work, 2 suggestions that they have on improving the work, and a question that they still have. You obviously could vary this 3-2-1 to make it work for your group. Time for that session code you've been waiting for. It is CAM02. Again, the session code is CAM02. Chapter 6. In this chapter, we're going to take a look at the tools and spaces, which are the framework that allows the learning to take place. It's important to focus on what kids need to know and the best way to make that happen. A couple words of caution, especially when we think about the tools. Don't get caught up in those latest gadgets and technology. Make sure that it's actually helpful to what you're trying to accomplish. When you're designing both through tools, but especially your spaces, keep inclusivity in mind. Think about equity and think about also making sure that you're teaching for tolerance in that space. So reflect on your current classroom or even envision a future classroom if you don't have your own yet. Will it empower creativity or scream compliance with rules posted all over? Does it promote active or passive learning? Does it allow for collaboration? Let's take a look at things to consider. When it comes to tools, it's important to encourage students to choose the proper tools. Especially with the little kiddos, you might have to work on that a little bit more. We want to make sure that the tools that they're using align to the goals that they have set for learning. If the tools provide instant informative feedback, those are more helpful. They also suggest mastering a few go-to tools as opposed to getting caught up in dabbling with a lot of different tools. Think about student accessibility. And when it comes to space, maximize the amount of daylight and fresh air in your classroom whenever possible. Create specialized areas to allow for individual work, group work, reading zones. Adam Fayol is interviewed in one of the videos, and he suggests considering watering holes, campfires, and caves. Watering holes allow a space for students and teachers to share info, for all to have equal say. A campfire is a place to gather and learn from an expert, such as a storyteller. And of course, the caves would allow for independent, quiet time, kind of reflective area. Also consider ways to allow for student personalization, which we talked about before. It's important when making this design of your space to find that balance somewhere between a sterile hospital space and a bold, bright, covered wall with every single inch of space taken up with chaos. This brings us to the final chapter. As educators, we have the power to leave a legacy, which also comes with a lot of responsibility. A few questions to think about. Are we using the right tools to actually measure our students' success? Confession, not a Patriot fan, not a huge Tom Brady fan. However, the story about his performance on the NFL Combine test and his current accolades in the NFL show us what can happen if we don't use the right tools as a measure of success in our students. So for those of you that don't know, his combine scores led him to last to the 6th round in the NFL draft, which shows us that those combine tests didn't measure some important things. It didn't indicate anything about Tom Brady's work ethic, his competitiveness, his leadership abilities, perseverance, resiliency, or even his burning desire to win. So we need to think about the tools we're using in our classrooms and in our schools. Are we using the right tools to tell us what our students are successful at? Do we recognize all students or only our students who fit into the student of the month parameters, or top 10, or those with perfect attendance? What about those students who score poor academically but have some skills and qualities to succeed in life? What if we replaced attention seeking with connection seeking when it comes to those difficult students? Would it make us think a little differently about them? What can we do to celebrate all of our students? So as you travel this journey, think about how you impact others. Remember, actions speak louder than words. Thomas C. Murray actually suggests writing down what we want others to say about us when we retire. You don't need to give it to anybody to read, but revisit it often. See if what you're doing actually aligns with what you want others to think of you. Keep in mind also that our students want to leave their own legacy, so help guide them through what it means and allow them time to reflect on what they want or hope for while they're in school. As you design these experiences that will impact a lifetime, don't forget to make every interaction count. Let the love of the work that you do inspire others to give their best. Don't forget, your mindset matters. You have to take care of you so that you can take care of others. It helps to surround yourself with positive people who have a can-do mentality and will lovingly push you to be better. And through all of this, be present and enjoy the journey. Thanks again for attending Designing for Impact, part of RockEd 2020. I hope you were able to find value in some of the information. Remember, it is Thomas C. Murray's work. Personal and Authentic is the book. I encourage you to read it. Check out his website and all of the resources that he provides. Follow him on social media. Good luck to you as you plan for the upcoming school year. I hope that you are safe and well. Thanks again. Enjoy the journey.